Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast about other podcasts, where every single week we talk about a podcast that we recommended last week, and we talk about it in a book club style discussion. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week we are talking about The Podfather.
We have discovered the most famous podcast of all time. So congratulations to us.
It took so much effort to discover this podcast.
Years of research and studying has brought us to the Joe Rogan Experience.
So we can't be a podcast discussion show without having talked at least once about the podcast that is at least in our experience, the one podcast that you'll ask somebody, have you listened to you know what a podcast is? You ever listened to podcasts? Oh yeah, I've listened to Joe Rogan Experience. And it's like, okay, well, have you ever listened to anything else? No, just that one.
Yeah, no, sometimes. It really is, the reach that he has generated with the show is incredible. And there's a lot of stuff that's really interesting about his show, because I also think this is a type of show a lot of people have tried to emulate, and it's pretty tough to emulate this.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I think I was going to say this when we were off mic, but I thought that it was a good thing to say here. This is not my favorite show. It's not really, I'm not a big interview show person anyway. I never have been. It has to be a very specific person being interviewed for me to really get my enjoyment out of it. With that said, I think that a lot of the hype around this show is that it's been around for so long.
Yeah, and a little bit of background on the show. So Joe Rogan, for the longest time, was just a comedian and actor. He was on news radio. He was doing stand-up from the late 80s until now. Honestly, he's putting out stand-up specials still. He became a UFC commentary person. So for a long time... Huh?
Commentator?
Yeah, commentator, I guess. But before he was actually like a color commentator, he was like I don't know what you'd call it. A backstage interview person. So in between fights, he would talk to the fighters. He wasn't doing like play-by-play like he does now. And he did that starting in 99. Or no, in 97, actually. He was at UFC 12, which is early. So he saw UFC number 2 in 94, and he's like, this is pretty great. And so he just reached out, and he started doing that where he was talking to the fighters in between rounds. Then the UFC got bought out in 2001, and he became friends with Dana White, who's the current president, and they made him color commentary, even though the quote they have on this is he offered him the job, and he initially declined it, saying he just wanted to go to the fights and drink. So he wasn't really...
This sounds very much like him, for sure.
But he literally became the voice of the UFC since. He stepped back a little bit just because it was a ton of travel and a lot of work to maintain. But he was really the voice of a lot of the major moments in UFC history, and has been since. And then he was the host of Fear Factor. A lot of people probably remember that.
From. And like bit parts in movies and stuff.
Yeah. And then in 2009, and Kirk told me right before this that they actually started forming the idea in 2003 for the Joe Rogan Experience.
That's so long ago.
That's very early adopter.
We were still in high school.
Yeah. We were still like freshmen in high school.
That is nuts.
We were babies when this was starting.
We were babies when he was... So basically he hired somebody to just start filming him for his website. And he basically said, record everything. Just record everything. And they were starting to see that people wanted more and more content out of the situation, whatever. And they kind of went with it. They were trying to find what would work. And so they decided to do filming alongside with podcasts, because it was a new form at the time, really early. And they came out with their first episode in December, literally Christmas Eve of 2009.
And I think this is after YouTube changed their rules, because early YouTube had a 15-minute limit on videos.
I didn't know that.
And so that is not something that the Joe Rogan Experience could work around. And so once this changed, they launched, and so they have been making podcasts since then. And literally by the end of that year, or no, in 2015, it was downloaded 11 million times. And then by October that year, it was downloaded 16 million times each month.
That is okay. As podcasters that see our numbers, that is mind blowing.
No, that's the bottom 90% of podcasts combined.
That's nuts.
Yeah. He has an extremely successful podcast. And
to the point that this is the reason, one of the reasons that this was the timely epoch of the PDS to talk about the Joe Rogan Experience was he just signed an exclusive deal to be on Spotify, which, by the way, he is not there yet.
No, he's not.
Which I didn't know that. I figured he was on everything.
Very little. The only thing I've seen him on, well, no,
he's on Stitcher.
He's on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts too. And then it's YouTube. Honestly, there is no podcast I've ever heard of that is as successful on video as they are on audio. He is.
Probably, maybe more. I don't know.
It's hard to tell.
Well, maybe it can be. But anyway, he got bought basically by Spotify for $100 million. Mm-hmm. I don't know how people are calling him a sellout and stuff like that. Who the freak cares? The dude just got $100 million.
No, and you know why, right? Because podcasts were free.
Well, yeah.
But and I mean, technically Spotify is still free, but it's limiting the reach. So original podcasting, they just put it out into the ether. Here's the podcast.
You can still listen to Joe Rogan on Spotify for free, correct?
Right, but you can only listen to it on Spotify. Is the problem. The exclusivity. So it's getting more narrow. A lot of networks are picking up exclusive content. A lot of platforms are picking up exclusive content. And the world that used to be literally you make a podcast, you put it in your RSS feed, and whoever wants to have it can have it is going away. And that's what people are upset about, if I'm gathering it correctly. But $100 million,
I don't blame him.
Good for him.
I do not blame him.
No, that's crazy money. That's crazy money.
For sure.
But that's why people are upset, is people are concerned about podcasts becoming so popular that it's changing.
Even they started very humbly with their sponsorships.
They did. And I mean, this is a sponsor that Kirk has been trying to ask me to reach out to constantly. And
do not know. I'm writing an edit on that one. I'm not letting that one go out. That is not something that's going to happen.
Well, if you're editing it, he did tell me that. Everybody was watching. He made me say that.
Oh, no. So even they started humbly with their sponsorships. I mean, their first sponsorship back in 2010, it was a sex toy production company called Fleshlight. I'm not going to go into details about it. You can look that up on your own time.
Beware.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I didn't tell you to look it up, but you can.
You can. Don't do it at work. Don't do it. It's a sex toy. It's a sex company.
But, gosh, this Wikipedia article. The company withdrew in mid-2012 when it claimed that it had already saturated its market.
It's effective marketing right there.
Man, but it is funny because especially if you watch the YouTube videos, man, these ads are ridiculous. They're just so silly. It's the most bro-ish ads possible.
Oh, they knew their target audience. That's the thing. And I think we talked about on the other show that Nielsen, the classically like Nielsen ratings on TV shows and everything like that, they have figured this out, and Nielsen is going to have a podcast division that's literally just trying to find demographics within podcasting specifically.
Wow, I did not. Well, no, they did have a booth when we went to Podcast Movement.
Mm-hmm. They're moving in. So, and people are starting to figure out just how much reach you can have by getting specific with who a listener base is for a podcast.
Yeah. Now, there is something else about his format that I find fascinating, and it feels a little icky in a way, but in another way, I get the appeal. He just gets real drunk and ripped, and he tries to get his interviewee drunk and high as well most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's a very I don't know. He gets very open.
Yeah, candid
answers.
conversations.
Very candid conversations. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, he does. And I don't know. I guess since we're on kind of the format, I'll go into a little bit of the stuff that I like and at least respect about what he's doing. Joe Rogan does not really have, I mean, I'm sure there's limits to a point, but in general, he will talk to whoever. He will talk, and not one side or the other, because I'm pretty sure he had Bernie Sanders on there. He's had Alex Jones on there. He had Elon Musk on there. He's had a ridiculous amount of scientists, because this episode we recommended is like 623. He's over 1,200 now. 1,200 episodes of this show.
That is so many episodes.
And a lot of it is doctors and cryptozoologists, and it doesn't matter. If he finds it interesting, he will talk to you. It's not he gets into heat sometimes. Because, okay, Alex Jones, for example, he was booted off most major platforms for some of the stuff that he said. And then Joe Rogan has him on, and people are like, you shouldn't have even given him a platform to talk. But at the same time, is it worth understanding? Because there was some things that he challenged him on. Yeah. And I feel like he's not a really hard-hitting interviewer. He's not trying to attack people typically, but he'll also speak his mind. And I do respect the idea that he's not trying to point people in a direction. He's really just kind of opening up the conversation. And I think that he's kind of okay with sometimes you think that he's wrong about something or you disagree with him on it, and it's just conversational. And honestly, I feel like the kind of discourse he has, and with the wide amount of people, it's pretty impressive, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, for sure. So we've talked about the podcast a lot. Now let's talk about the episode that we recommended, which was Survivorman.
Yeah, it's Les Stroud. The Survivorman.
The Survivorman.
Yeah, the one and only Survivorman. And I definitely chose this episode because, and you know this, we talked about this on the last episode, we watched a lot of Survivorman. There's nothing like that show, even now. I think that just how hardcore this soft-spoken Canadian dude is kind of unparalleled, because for anybody who hasn't seen Survivorman, go check it out. It's somewhere, I'm sure. And it's amazing. It's one guy wanders into the woods. He has 5 cameras with him, so he's carrying bags around, but he's by himself. He usually had a medical team within 15 miles of him, just so if something were to happen, they could try to save him. But then he would wander off. And literally, because he also was a filmmaker, he would go and he'd set up a camera, he'd walk back, and he'd walk towards it, because he was not only surviving in some of the harshest conditions he could put himself in, he was recording it and trying to make a visually interesting TV show. Because that's the thing. It wasn't just, you could very easily just do face cam, but then you lose all the nature and you lose all the stuff that Survivorman had. It really is a fantastic looking show. And then strip away all of the kind of the frills that came from the next generation of survival shows. And it's literally about surviving, about not dying.
Yeah, and he gives you tips. I mean, you literally, I know this is silly, but if you watched enough Survivorman, if you were in a survival situation, you would know a lot of tricks, a lot of ways to get through situations that previously you would not know about.
Yeah, sure. And it's really, really practical. There's not anything where you're like, oh, I need to be a extreme athlete to be able to pull this off. It's very practical and well thought out. So that's a little bit about him. And he did this for 10 seasons, something like that. He has, on this episode, they talk all about Survivorman Bigfoot, where he goes out with Bigfoot.
Yeah, again, this was a while ago, so this isn't a new thing.
This episode was 7 years ago.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience has been on forever. It's been on for a really long time.
But yeah, they talked a lot about, because I think this was right before that show was supposed to come out. Mm-hmm. So they talked a lot about his Bigfoot show that was soon to be released on Discovery Channel and Science Channel. And, they had very lengthy discussions about Bigfoot. So let's talk for a minute about Bigfoot. Let's take out of their 2.5 hour conversation.
And they did just randomly come back to it.
It was like
it's
2 hours.
So
Bigfoot. What do you think about Bigfoot? We've had this discussion before in the past, but for those that haven't listened to those episodes,
I mean,
I want it to be real.
And I've definitely talked about this, where I want things that are supernatural, UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, crazy sea monsters, doesn't matter. I want these things to be real. They kind of roasted him on there, but he said it means there's still like magic in the world. And I think they were just super ripped at this point because they didn't start this interview.
They
didn't start this interview until like 1:00.
It was after Joe Rogan had just done a stand-up set somewhere.
And he saw Les Stroud. And he's like, hey, you want to come talk? And they did. And so they were up to like 4 a.m. talking about Bigfoot and drinking. So some of it, I think that like, and also Joe Rogan likes to be devil's advocate because there was a lot of times where he'd riff on things that, and then like later he would backtrack. He's like, okay, I'm messing with you, but I want this to be real. And Les Stroud said that it would mean that there's still stuff that we don't know. You know, there's still unexplained awesome things about the world.
I believe that there's still a lot of unexplained things. In fact, I mean, I was doing a little bit of research for this episode, and we find a ridiculous amount of new species every single year. Like I think it was like 20,000 a year is the average of how many new species we find. And so I think that's fascinating. I don't think I can say that I believe in Bigfoot, but I don't like to say I don't believe in anything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like to say I don't believe in UFOs. I don't believe in Bigfoot.
And the best thing...
I think there is a possibility.
Yeah, no, the best thing about Bigfoot is you're like, okay, you know, maybe there could be apes that are slightly larger than gorillas. You know? It's not outside the complete realm of possibility. Some of the lore around him is extreme, but other than that, it's not weird to think there could be a large ape. So it's right there on the limit.
Now they did talk a little bit, and I did do a little bit of research. That's where I saw this fact about the 20,000 per year. It's from the Discovery Channel website, but they talked about other animals that previously were thought to be cryptozoological. And if you don't know what cryptozoology is, it's the study of basically mythical creatures, creatures that most people think are not real. Here's just a quick list, and maybe we'll talk about a few of them. But narwhals.
Sure, I get that. Unicorn whales.
Yep. Rhinoceros. I didn't know that one.
I didn't either, but that's kind of like a beefy unicorn. I like how all these are unicorns. I wonder if that's what does it. Is people are like, no, that sounds too much like a unicorn. That's weird.
If it's a lot of it has to do with it if it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
So this one definitely sounds crazy, and I would not believe in this either if I had not seen it.
Yeah.
Was a platypus.
Yeah. No, it makes no sense.
For a long time, people thought this was completely made up.
I get that. They're like, oh, there's some little furry duck rabbit that lives in the water and has
a bill of a duck,
toe.
has a poisoned toe. It
lays eggs.
Yes,
it's a mammal.
It should not exist.
Once it lays eggs, I think it produces milk too. The thing makes no sense. Platypus makes no sense.
It does make no sense. Giant squid. This one's new. Like this one's not that old that we actually confirmed that it exists.
They're all close, like the Kraken. You know, I'm sure that and that's the interesting thing is things get so steeped in lore that you're like, oh, this can't possibly be true. Krakens can't be real. That was sailors that were drunk and dehydrated and they just thought they saw a Kraken. But if you see, there's literal footage of giant squids now and they're enormous.
Yes. They get so big. And then we've seen now we realize that these whales, a lot of times the whales will have scars from being attacked from freaking squid, giant squid. I mean, these are like sperm whales or these ginormous whales being attacked by squid. And forever, this was a mythological creature. No, it did not exist. The one that we've talked about in the past, but I didn't even know was a mythical creature, was gorillas.
I didn't know that was mythical either.
Yeah, we talked about it a while
too human-like.
Because they live, specifically silverback gorillas, they live so far into the bush that only indigenous people had seen them. And so it was just like lore passed down. I mean, I'm not saying that it was in 2000 they were discovered. They were discovered, they were confirmed to be discovered in 1847.
Yeah, that's still fairly
not that
recent.
long ago,
no.
compared to like a lot of things that we know.
And I mean, I want to think that it could still be difficult like that, because that's essentially the premise of Bigfoot too, is that he lives in the far reaches of the Northwest, where it's just enormous swaths of just dense forest. And there's no way that you could possibly track something that's elusive, where you could just immediately say, oh, I'm going to go find it. I'm going to go find one of these.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, honestly, yeah, there's a lot of people who are like Bigfoot hunters. Still, put all the Bigfoot hunters in the forest at the same time. They still can't cover the whole forest. And if it's an intelligent ape, could it hide? Yeah, probably. I don't know. It's the perfect amount of things to make it so it's like,
I don't know.
hard to tell.
That's what I'm saying. It's like no one should be saying definitively either way, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can't say they don't exist, because we've seen things like it throughout history and through skeletal remains and stuff like that there were giant apes.
Yeah, the okapi was another one. It was 2008 before a motion-triggered camera in the jungle of the Democratic Republic of Congo caught the first ever photo of an okapi in the wild.
It was an okapi.
It's got a zebra butt. It's a deer with a zebra butt.
Oh, okay.
But I've actually seen these now at the zoo at Animal Kingdom.
Okay.
They have them there. They used to call it the African unicorn, because of how ridiculous people used to think that it existed. No one believed that it existed.
Yeah.
And it's now kind of like it is kind of the poster child for cryptozoologists, because it's one of the most recent ones.
It's like, oh, you called this a unicorn. Look, there he is. That's no unicorn. That's a zebra-butted deer.
Zebra butt deer. I mean, that is what it is. But yeah, it's just I don't know. There's a lot of fascinating things about nature. And I think more than anything, I think there's less chance of Bigfoot being real as there is to like some ridiculous sea monsters being real. Like that we have never seen.
That's a tough one.
The sea is so undiscovered still.
Yeah, no, yeah. I would say there's much more chance of there being some weird sea monster that we don't know about. We do not know anything about the oceans.
I bet you most of these 20,000 species that are being discovered every year are either bugs, like in the rainforests,
sure, or
fish and stuff in the ocean.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, because the ocean is relatively unexplored still, comparatively. And you don't have the thing that makes Bigfoot a little bit tricky. There's a bunch of people with phones all the time. And so you would think at some point somebody's going to just accidentally bump into one and have their phone, and then there you go. So I don't know. But like we said, we hope it's true. But then we get to Les Stroud. Yeah. An awesome guy, has almost died many, many times on video. It's a lot. He talks in this one, and there was a lot of facts about tigers I was unaware of, that Joe Rogan just went crazy talking about tigers, because they are intense animals.
Okay. Oh,
because I've showed you that
for a second. You did actually. You mentioned it. I've never seen it until I watched this.
Oh, okay.
The tiger jumping on the dude on the elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw it. I pulled it. I was listening to it on my phone, and I pulled it out of my pocket so I could watch that piece.
It's insane. You don't even see it in the grass as they walk right past it, too.
It is crazy. I will say this. I feel like Joe Rogan says a lot of stuff that I cringed a lot about. Maybe it's because I hosted with Josh for so long that I was like, you can't say that thing. You can't do that thing or whatever. But he talked multiple times about how he doesn't think there should be more tigers.
Yes, he did say that.
I was like,
no, but then
what
he threw out that
saying?
statistic that they've killed 300,000 people. But I think it was over like 200 years, right?
Yeah, that was like a ridiculous amount of time.
But he did have the entire thing. It's like they're killing people, so we don't need more. We have the right amount of tigers.
I mean, if you're gonna go that way, I would definitely say sharks. If before I'd say tigers. Anyway, tigers are beautiful. I think tigers are awesome. I think they're dangerous and should definitely be
avoided.
Respected is the word I was going to say. But yeah, if you're in that area, maybe avoid it as well.
Yeah. I would definitely avoid tiger areas because, they talk a lot about Les Stroud. I think had just gotten back from India, it sounded like, and he had a lot of crazy experiences there. But the one that stuck with him was at some point a tiger tracked him and knew where he was, and he started hearing growling, and all the monkeys and everything went insane. And that's when you know that like you're in trouble, because that's the thing. Tigers are one of the most apex predators there are, and that they're perfectly stealthy and you don't really hear anything. Like they talk about this video that we've talked about. It's literally a guy riding on the back of an elephant through a field, and literally they go 5 feet past the tiger. It's 5 feet away from him, but then it just appears out of the grass and leaps onto the back of the elephant and just mauls a guy on top of an elephant, just immediately, instantly. And
it looks easy.
Yeah,
like,
within 5 seconds, just attacked by a tiger on top of an elephant. So they are absolutely intense animals. And Les Stroud tells the story of a tiger had tracked him, and everything went crazy. So he climbed a tree, but he had to climb like 14 feet up. And he just kept hearing like growling, and he had to just sit there all night. And I just started thinking about what that night would be like. Because Joe Rogan asked him, like, did you sleep? He was like, no.
No, I didn't sleep.
I sat there. I sat there in the tree. And
this isn't the Hunger Games. I didn't tie myself in a tree and, go to sleep.
I contemplated my existence for 8 hours until it was morning.
Oh, man, I've been in the woods by myself in not a dangerous area at all. I mean, like the biggest predator is like a coyote. Okay, squirrels.
Attack squirrels.
I'd be more scared of squirrels.
Than a coyote.
Squirrels are mean little creatures.
Yeah, I mean, if you have any walnuts in your pockets, you're in trouble.
Yeah. But there is something about being in the woods that is just, it's scary.
Oh, yeah. No,
when you're by yourself.
I'll tell Josh's story for him. He went on a solo adventure to the woods one time, and he went to, there's a place in Florida called the Green Swamp that's just essentially that, a huge forested swampland it's very, very large, and it's very, very dark because there's so much space there that the light pollution is really low. And so he went by himself, and he was like about to go to sleep, and a barn owl flew overhead and screeched. And if you have never heard a barn owl screech, you should check that noise out. Sounds like some kind of a demon gargoyle.
A murder alien.
Yeah, it's
demon.
It's unsettling to hear it in a normal situation, and he heard it at night. Not only that, it was doing mating calls. So then another barn owl comes, and then both of them are screaming over his head the whole night. He said he had a tough time sleeping. No, but Les Stroud also talks.
I would get in the fetal position and cry.
Yeah, no, it would be. I would not really appreciate that. But I did see a couple things about Les Stroud talking about the times where he got really close to dying. One time he was in the Sahara and he got heat exhaustion.
Yeah, I saw that little.
And he started panicking pretty hard because, panicking as far as he was concerned for himself. He doesn't really panic. The dude's pretty nonchalant.
Is so low key about almost everything.
And then you can look up, there's another one where he slides down a mountain because he essentially he planned like, I heard you can walk down this mountain and you can get out. And so he's like, okay, I'll walk down the mountain. But it was frozen at the time. Like there was snow everywhere. And so he did that, but the footing was not good. And so he decided to like slide down on his butt. He got drenched. And he said that, I think that's the one he says is he was the closest to dying, was because hypothermia. He like fully soaked his clothes with sweating and with water. And literally sweating in the freezing cold can kill you.
Yeah.
That's why if you read stuff with Les Stroud, he always says you don't want to do anything active unless you have to. You want to walk gingerly. You don't want to try and push yourself. You don't want to jump. You don't want to do anything because all of that is calories that you can't lose when you're in a survival situation, which is different than some other shows. So, okay, I read it. He did an AMA very shortly after this. He had a couple things that were pretty great. Okay, so somebody asked him, Did you have a plan in place in the unfortunate event that you did not survive? Would you have wanted that episode to air? Les Stroud said, yes, I would have. I told my crew, edit it, air it, and make sure that my kids benefit from it. Hardcore.
Wow.
Hardcore. He definitely talks a lot about... Okay, so right after Survivorman came out, this is kind of first of its kind and only of its kind. Nobody ever was able to replicate what he was doing.
I think the closest was Man vs. Wild. Did he throw any shade on that one?
Oh, yes.
He did? He did?
Oh, yes. He does not like that one, even a little bit. Okay, so Man vs. Wild, for those who don't know, is he was like ex-SAS, Special Forces guy out of England, and he does everything the opposite of what we've just described. He does extremely dangerous things. He does disturbing things.
He always eats stupid
or like
crap.
He drinks his pee on
he always
most
does
episodes.
Real stupid stuff. He does. It was. I will say, in a lot of ways, it was more entertaining to watch.
Oh, it definitely was. That's why he did it.
You always felt like he was closer to
No,
dying.
he'd like jump over cliffs or like try and scale the side of a mountain, and like he would do things like that.
But
and
he was a special forces dude, and he could.
Yeah, but would you in an actual survival situation?
Survivorman was a different. I feel like it was a different take on it. It was more like, this is what a normal person should do in this situation.
Yeah, and he was actually surviving.
And a lot of times he would have stuff that you would have on hand anyway.
Yeah.
When you went in the woods.
Yeah, he would essentially frame every one of these episodes as like a little scenario. Like, oh, I'm going on a trip hiking. I have a power bar. I have a little bit of water. I have a flashlight, and that's it. So he'd set up scenarios. One time he braced his arm.
So he wasn't sponsored by...
He was not. It was Flashlight.
Okay.
Flash.
It's just for emergencies.
No, but Bear Grylls, I mean, what kind of... Yeah, I could see you use that in a survival situation. It's like a canteen.
Oh, man.
Les Stroud literally was surviving. He was by himself.
Yeah.
Bear Grylls had an entire like production team around him, and the room, I don't know. There's no way to tell. I haven't seen pictures of it. The rumor was he would do his little stunts and they'd go to like a hotel. So he'd like go out and do all his stunts and things, drink a little elephant poop, and then go back to the hotel. And so that's why Les Stroud didn't like it, because he didn't want people to try what they're seeing here and think that's like survival. That wasn't at least his type of survival. And then I saw one more on this AMA that I wanted to
I will
mention.
say, I did like Man vs. Wild, though.
Oh, I liked it fine. It was extremely entertaining, but
I like Bear Grylls.
Survivorman was my jam.
But Survivorman was the OG, and I will definitely respect that.
And visually, it was better, even though it was one dude and cameras.
I believed it with him.
Yeah.
I believed it with Les Stroud. I never believed it with Man vs.
That's
Wild.
the thing. Yeah, it's just like, wow, that dude just jumped off a waterfall for no reason.
There was like 5 angles, and one of them's moving.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm by myself, I swear.
Yeah. It's like, sure, that's it. So I saw one more from this I just thought was that was an interesting kind of look into Les. So somebody just messaged him, and this has gold and everything. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. Hi, Les. The only thing I want to say to you is thank you. Thank you for everything you've done to make my nights a tiny bit better. In 2008, I was in a car wreck that paralyzed me. When I got out of the hospital, every night trying to go to sleep was the worst time I have ever and will ever have in my life. It was complete hell, and I never want to experience it again. Filled with tears every night, contemplating suicide and just wishing it would go away. And maybe the next morning, I might be able to wiggle a toe, twist an ankle, anything to keep my hopes up, but it never came. I was browsing the internet one night when I came upon your episode of Survivorman. I'll never forget watching that first episode. It felt like you were suffering with me. You were in hell while I was in hell. I could relate to you. I felt like I was out there with you, struggling through this condition as you were struggling with surviving. I would even not eat dinner and bring myself a snack or two and try to ration the snack down throughout a couple of episodes like you were rationing your food. I wanted to be like you. The willpower you had was everything I wanted to get me through this. I just want to say thank you. You kept me sane through the months and months of nights filled with tears and terrible thoughts. When I walk again one day, I'm going to pay that favor you did for me back. I'm going to travel to see you just to say thank you for what you did to me. And Les Stroud.
Dang it, Zach.
Les Stroud said, and I will greet you with open arms and go for a walk with you. Make it so, my friend.
Why did you read that?
I'm telling you, it's good. That's what I'm saying. It's good.
I'm not crying. You're crying.
It's
Dang it.
It's just good. I don't know. He's a very, very caring guy. He loves nature. He literally plays music about like conservation. He loves making music. He loves making interesting stuff. He loves just making nature look amazing and trying to conserve it and things like that. Les Stroud's an amazing guy, and that's
really
definitely
is.
why I wanted to talk about his episode of Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it was a really good discussion about. I do say I wish they talked a little bit more about Survivorman type stuff, but I get it. It was
Basically turned into a Bigfoot combo.
It was right before his new Bigfoot show was coming out, so they talked a lot about it. It's kind of like when someone comes out with a new book, that's the one they're talking about, even though you want to hear about the one that you love so much that they wrote a long time ago. But it was definitely fun to listen to. Obviously, we were able to discuss a lot of stuff from it, it definitely brings out a lot of discussion points and stuff like that. Everyone's heard of this show, so I don't think it was a discovery as in like, ooh, we found a new show for you. But it was definitely something that was worth discussing.
Yeah.
I have a new recommendation for this week.
Okay.
And this one you may not have heard of before. It's, I would say, mid-grade indie, if that's a thing.
Sure.
It's not like indie, but it's
not like two guys in a random room recording a podcast, indie.
You made it sound weird.
Like us.
Yeah, it's not as indie as us. But it's called Speak Up. And it's another storytelling podcast. You know how much I love storytelling podcasts. And there's so many just negative things saturating the news right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like, as we sit here, there's a ridiculous amount of bad stuff happening right now.
Yeah, we literally talked about this before we recorded. So we're like, what do we pick here?
Because, I mean, we have a decent backlog of things that we want to discuss, but we wanted to pick one that was a little bit lighthearted, a little bit more enjoyable, and just escapism. Because I feel like that's what we need right now. That's what I need right now.
Yeah, no, it's nice to take a break from the world right now.
So we've got some heavy stuff later on, but not yet. This week's recommendation is a much lighter one. The specific episode I want to recommend is episode 1, which usually when you listen to a podcast, you do not want to recommend episode 1.
It depends.
Because
it really depends.
Unless it's like the New York Times making it or NPR or something like that.
Yeah, or if it's like Dirty John or something where you want to start with the beginning of the story.
Then usually it's like it gets better with time. Yeah. This show does get better with time, but this was one of my favorite episodes that I found because of the storytelling in this episode. And as a independent produced podcast, I respect them a lot for having such good quality at the beginning. Because
we did too.
Yes, we respect that other people like us can make good first episodes.
Yeah,
You weren't even here yet.
No, I wasn't on the first episode.
You weren't even here to see the travesty of what we started with. Oh, it was so bad. I don't think anybody will ever be able to listen to that again. It will never be on any podcast catcher because I will not allow it to be there.
I will never let it out of my sight.
It is locked, and I will burn it with fire. But the episode is with Chris Kriesen, I Am Titan. What I like about this show is that it's not just a storytelling podcast. It's a lot like The Moth, where someone is telling a story in a live environment, but the hosts are kind of experts in storytelling.
Okay.
The man, it's husband and wife duo that hosts the show together, but the man actually writes and has a website dedicated to like helping companies and stuff tell their stories or turn their experiences into stories for marketing and stuff like that. And so that's his expertise. So what they do at the end of a story is they talk about how some of the great choices that the storyteller took in crafting their story, and then maybe some of the things that they could have chosen to do that would have made the story even better. And I love that so much because I've always really respected somebody that can take even the most mundane thing or experience and turn it into a fascinating story. when you find a good storyteller, there's an art to storytelling, man.
Oh yeah, no, there definitely is.
Because there can be somebody that has experienced the most crazy thing ever, but if they're not a good storyteller, it's going to sound like the most boring.
No, you can tell a good storyteller from a stupid story that is still amazing.
Yes.
Them telling you their story about going to the gas station, you're like, what?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And I want to learn to someday be a very good storyteller. And so that's why I really enjoyed this podcast and kind of connected with it. I want to reach out to them because they seem very accessible. Because they do a lot of like workshops and stuff to help people tell stories and stuff like that, like online workshops.
Do a lot of networking.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're really cool people, it seems like. And one of the man is I think like elementary school teacher and an author. So he's those two things at the same time, plus a podcaster. So he's very busy.
That's very interesting.
But yeah, so
Sounds
that is
good.
Speak Up, episode 1, Chris Kriesen, I Am Titan.
And remember,
there's always more to discover.
thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We have a few things we'd like to tell you. First, we would love to hear from you on Twitter at the PDS Official or in our Facebook group, the Podcast Discovery Club.
Secondly, leaving a rating or review on iTunes helps tremendously in giving us visibility and also visibility to the podcast that we recommend. You can also check out our Patreon page to get exclusive bloopers, old episode archives, and other exclusive content while supporting the show.
Finally, seriously, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you about what you love about podcasts. And thank you for being a part of all of the things that we do.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.